I don't see my preview yet. Whoa! Excellent. All right, that gets this party started. So that's funny. I can't see my little preview down here.
I don't know if it's our internet.
Well, I can see it. It's just like this is weird. It's not doing this full screen. It's just like the little strip down at the bottom. Is it on?
I think so.
Lail's on. Okay, so are we back? Can you guys see me? Because I'm having a hard time seeing myself. So you guys in the chat, be my lifeline here. Fishing for the lifeline. You guys on? Where are you? Where's my lifeline? Okay, we're back. Thanks, True. You're my hero. Okay, so yeah, hopefully it won't be as laggy now because we are on the Ethernet cable. And yeah, so basically where I just was I put 8 cups of water and 8 cups of vinegar in the pot behind me, and I turned the fire on, and I'm going to use the same 1 tablespoon of salt to 2 cups of water that I do for my brine when I ferment pickle. You kind of like on the smaller side of the tablespoons though. So that means if I put 8 cups of water in here, that'll be 4 tablespoons of salt. So that's 1, and that's 2, and that's 3, that is 4. And that will be plenty. And for that amount of water and vinegar stuff, let's see what 3 tablespoons of pickling spice looks like, since I want to keep those chilies out. 2, 3. Yeah, that looks good. So the pickling spice is just to your taste, obviously. So if you like it, you know, more pickling spicy, then go ahead and add another tablespoon, even 2 if you like them really strong. But yeah, that's just like the melange pickling spice. If you can find this in bulk, I highly recommend you do so because it is way, way, way cheaper. If you can find this in a bulk bin at like a co-op or something like that. Otherwise, they sell this in these little boxes of pickling spice, and those are like $3 or $4 for like just a couple tablespoons of spice. But then you can get this by the pound, and it's like it's way more accessible. So what's going to go into the escabeche veggies? I typically do cauliflower, carrots, celery, jalapenos. I'm also going to do the eggs dilly this time because I like it that way. But the traditional escabeche veggies are pretty much just jalapeno and other spices, right? So, like I said before, escabeche is just basically Spanish for pickle, and they're the spicy veggies that you find at the salsa bar. So I do this with the pickled eggs because the flavors go really well together. So first thing I'm going to do is chop these up into pickle-sized chunks, which I find that's a good pickle size for my mouth. But if you want to do these like as more like shoestring, you can do it that way. I don't really recommend doing it in like thicker chunks than this because it takes them a lot longer to pickle. So, you know, 1/2 inch or so thick is probably the thickest that I would do. You can definitely go thinner. They will pickle faster. But, you know, since I'm going to leave my eggs in there for a couple of weeks at least, then, yeah.
That is a really loud.
It's really loud. Yeah. Oh, okay. So I've been instructed by my camera crew that I need to cut more quietly. How's that? There. Okay, so we got that many carrots. I'm probably going to do the other one too. So go. Hopefully I didn't kill your ears. But if I did, you probably got another one. So there we go. There's carrots. And that is, you know, I got a bag of cauliflower from Costco, so it comes in chunks like this. I think that's pretty big for the pickle jar. So I think, you know, like what's the size of a good bite-sized pickle? That's probably pretty good like that. So I'll trim my cauliflowers down to a more manageable bite size. The smaller you go, obviously, the faster they will pickle, but they tend to, you know, break apart in little tiny bits like this, and that ends up just being like lost in your vinegar brine. And you know, you can try to eat those at the end of the jar with like a spoon or something, but they're really strong and kind of hard. So it's better to kind of leave them in bigger chunks, and that's about as small as I'll go. Maybe like that is a small size. Yes. And once I get these in the pot and in the jars, I am going to revisit the ferments that I did last time. So you can see what happens if you do the pickles, like the fermentation process like we did last time with the mean beans and the sauerkraut. And I went ahead and left the sauerkraut in longer than I normally would, just so I can show you what calm yeast looks like. So you can leave sauerkraut on the counter for a really long time, and it'll just keep fermenting and getting softer and more pickly. I tend to be super impatient, and I can't really wait more than a week or two at the most before I'm digging into it with my fork because it's just so good. So I kind of, you know, I don't know if anybody besides Lael and True were here last time, but I had a bunch of extra cabbage. I could only fit so much in the first jar. So I started that, and then that extra bit of cabbage I did after the camera was off, and that one I did a little experiment with, where I added some of that really delicious red dilly beet juice that I was raving on and on about, and it kickstarted the fermentation process. You can do that. You can use brine from something else that already has the probiotic going in it and use that as a starter. It will definitely make your ferment go a little faster, and it will also impart some of the flavors from the last batch into the new batch. So I used a little bit of that dilly beet juice, and let me tell you guys, it is delish. Oh my god. I will definitely be doing that again, probably with the next thing I did. So, is any of the stuff from the last stream done? Yes, it is. Definitely the sauerkraut is done. I would say the mean beans are done. They're still a little crunchy, which I like. I like my pickles to have a bit of snap to them. So the mean beans are definitely done. You can let them go longer, and they'll just keep getting softer. So that's basically the thing with fermentation. The probiotics inside the ferment are digesting the fibrous matter of the vegetables. So the longer you let it go, the pickles will just keep getting softer and softer. So obviously at some point you don't want to be eating mush. So that's why, you know, with some veggies it takes like 3 days, like asparagus, 3 days tops, and it's done, it's ready. If you let it go for 5, it'll actually start getting kind of soft. Some people like it like that, you know, it's your pleasure. You pickle it for as long as you want. But a lot of people always ask me, how do I know if I've over pickled something? You just taste it, and if it is mushy, then you know, you overdid it, you left it too long, or it was too warm outside, because like I said last time, fermentation is temperature dependent. Warmer weather will make the ferment go faster. So what else did I do last time? I vinegar pickled the Brussels sprouts. So this process I'm doing tonight is just like I did the Brussels sprouts last time, which is the vinegar pickling. And I don't know, I haven't tried them in a couple of days, but they were pretty delicious and still a little too dense, too firm for my pleasure, for my taste. So the rest of the cauliflower in here are perfect sizes. So that is it for the cauliflower. So the Brussels sprouts might be done. We'll be checking on those. And what else did I do? Oh, the beets. The golden beets are definitely not done. So I said last time that as far as veggies go, what goes the shortest amount of time is asparagus. What goes the longest amount of time of anything that I ferment is beets. But they are worth the wait. So I would estimate the beets probably have another 2 to 3 weeks minimum, depending on if the weather warms up significantly. They may go a little faster. The last batch of beets that I did, I left on the counter for 8 weeks, and they are perfect. So, yeah, beets take a long time. But these ones I sliced thinner, so they will go faster than the red beets that I did last. And they're golden beets, so I'm not sure, I mean, it's probably not a lot of difference in the density of the golden beet versus the red beet. But they will go a little faster because they're thinner and the weather is warmer. This is a skunk, I think. I'm gonna go with skunk. Is it a sloth? Maybe it's a sloth. I don't think it's a sloth. It has this little hair thing on top.
What's the tail like?
It doesn't have a tail. This one is like one of those super cheap ass ones. So this isn't a onesie, it's a gunsie. I got this from my Australian friend Tristan. He gifted this to me during festival season when I lived there in Sydney. And he cut the legs and the arms off, so it's a summertime onesie. I wear it as like a beach cover-up because it's perfect over my bathing suit at the beach, and it's ridiculous, which I like. So, enough about onesies. What else do you guys? Maybe a slunk. Yes, it's a slunk. Sloth skunk. Maybe it's a badger. I'm gonna go with badger. Badger. A snake. So our vinegar is not quite, it's starting to simmer, so I'm gonna put that lid on it so it goes a little faster. So basically, I also usually do celery in this mix, but I went down into the garden to get some celery and it's not looking super pretty, or at least it wasn't yesterday, looking super pretty. So I decided to hold off on the celery in this particular batch. But typically speaking, I do this mix with carrots, cauliflower, celery in a similar size pickle as that, diagonally cut because they're more interesting, and jalapeno with the egg. Regular old pickling spice. Sometimes I use garlic. We have really a ton of garlic, so I'm definitely going to use garlic this time. We've got a whole bag of it from Costco, so we definitely need to use up the garlic. And this time around I'm also going to use dill because I have dill growing in the garden and it's delicious. But, you know, like I said before, like all these are the flavors are your choices. So if you've got favorite spices that you like to use in vegetables like this, try it out, you know. The whole seed spices are typically better for all pickling, though in the vinegar pickles it's not as important. With the ferment pickles it's more important because the powdered spices end up being a vector to potentially introduce molds. Yeah, my kitchen buddies hooking me up with garlic. So the jalapenos, this is also to your discretion how spicy you want these things to be. These are not very spicy. So, you know, the jalapenos that I grew up with, it's kind of disappointing. We're much smaller than this. I think this is some weird hybrid jalapeno that they're flooding the markets with now just because they're bigger. They are not as spicy as the jalapenos that I grew up with or the ones that I grow in my garden. But I got these like kind of in a bulk buy at Costco last time we did a pandemic grocery run. So this is 4 of kind of these big ones. And it's definitely going to impart some spice into this, but you know, I would just test your jalapenos first and make sure that you're not really getting yourself into something that you're not going to be able to. Don't finish something you can't, or don't start something you can't finish. Yeah, don't bite off more than you can chew with your spices. Anyway, so I'm also going to put probably 4 cloves of garlic in here because I like garlic and I got a lot of it, so I'm gonna give them a pop and get the skins off and throw them in whole, and they'll pickle, and pickled garlic is delicious. So this is one of those recipes that I'm not gonna mash this so hard that it's gonna kind of split apart. I'm just gonna pop it hard enough to get the skins off, because this later on when it's pickled, ooh yeah baby, just eat that with a fork or throw it in your Bloody Mary. Even better. So there's 2. There's 3. And by the time I'm done peeling this garlic, my vinegar mixture behind me should be boiling. So I put the salt and the pickling spices in there, and I'm gonna bring the vinegar, the half vinegar, half water mixture to a boil with the spices inside it. That's just gonna kickstart the spices in the vinegar mixture. And I'm not gonna cook the vegetables in it, but I am gonna throw them kind of in order of density into the vinegar bath for like probably a minute or two, and just keep adding them until the last thing I usually add is the celery, because it's the less dense and it can get soft really fast. So that I just throw in basically when I turn the fire off. But the eggs and the carrots and the cauliflower can all be in the vinegar bath, in a boiling vinegar bath for like 2 minutes. And that kickstart the pickling process. Now, the way that I grew up with these, my mom and my grandpa did not do the boiling step. They used pickling spices, and they just used a canned mix of escabeche vegetables. It's totally cheating. They did not do this from scratch. They turned out delicious. I'm not going to, fault them for that. It was definitely the shorthand way of doing it. They definitely did not do the boiling step, and it took the eggs probably at least 2 weeks longer to get that good pickled consistency. So I discovered that if you do this hot and you boil the eggs in the vinegar mixture for about 2 minutes, that speeds up that pickling process so much, because it basically just kick-starts and gets some vinegar like into that egg and gets it going. And I can eat these out of the jar in like 2 weeks rather than 4. So that's what I do now, and it also kind of kick-starts the spice and the vinegar process going with the carrots too, which end up being the most dense of these veggies. So I start with the carrots, and I follow it with the cauliflower, then the eggs, then the celery, and the jalapenos can kind of go in whenever. Garlic should probably be in there now. And that is kind of starting to do that simmer thing. Okay, so let me get my little bowl for my carrots. And hey, were we gonna do that other jar, Michael? The fun shaped
Nope.
jar?
I think that's it.
Okay, so we're gonna try to fit all of this in here.
We have a second jar.
We're gonna need a bigger jar than that. Not all this stuff is gonna fit in there. Kitchen helper Tanya, thank you, my lovely assistant Tanya, with my other jar. Okay, so I'm looking at the clock. It says 9:03 up here. So I don't really want to let those be in the water, and the eggs too, for much longer than 2 minutes. So depending on the size of my pot and the batches that I'm doing, a lot of times I'll do these in shifts, because the size of the batch I'm doing just makes it so that I can't have all the veggies in the bath at the same time. So let those be in there for a little bit so I don't, overdo the cauliflower. Well, we're only going to need like 30 seconds.
Now, what starts with the letter C? Cookie starts with C. Let's think of other things that starts with C. Who cares about other things? C is for cookie. That's good enough for me. C is for cookie. That's good enough for me. C is for cookie. That's good enough for me. Oh, cookie, cookie, cookie starts with C.
Okay, that's probably enough.
C is for cookie. That's good enough.
C is for cauliflower. C is for cauliflower. C is for cauliflower. All right. So that cauliflower can be in there for like a minute. I'm gonna get the jalapenos in there because we like a spicy man. No! That jalapeno! And I get my handy dandy ladle. And probably at a little over 60 seconds now. And I'm gonna toss that dill in there. And it'll kickstart that too. Alright. Give it maybe 30 more seconds.
What starts with the letter C? Cookie starts with C. Hey, you know what? A round cookie with one bite out of it looks like a C. A round donut with one bite out of it also looks like a C. But it is not as good as a cookie. Oh, the moon sometimes looks like a C, but you can't eat that. So, C is for cookie. That's good enough for me. Yeah, C is for cookie.
Okay, so that is when I'm going to turn my fire off, because that's been a little over 2 minutes, and we don't want to overdo it because we don't want to cook the veggies. And then I am just going to ladle stuff into my jar. And this is hot, so be careful with your glass, because I'm sure everybody's had the experience at some point of pouring something hot into a glass jar and having the glass jar shatter. Oh shit, that ladle's too big to go in there. Of course it is. So we'll go sideways. So I don't think this jar is going to be big enough to get all my eggs and my veggies in there. So I'm going to start off with 12 eggs. And then see how much of my veggies fit in there too. What was that? 5? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6, 7. 8, 9. 10. See, this is where I would play that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 11. 12. Okay, that's a dozen eggs in there. And I definitely want some jalapenos and some cauliflowers. So when I'm doing these for Burning Man, I definitely am a lot more picky with how many veggies go in my jar with my eggs, because of how I open them up over the course of the week. And what are you guys laughing at over there? So I definitely like pay more attention to like how many carrots and how many cauliflowers I go in, and try to have like a good ratio of eggs to cauliflower to carrots to celery. That way, for every egg I pull out, I know I can pull out 3 or 4 carrots and 3 or 4 cauliflowers, and still have the right ratios at the end of this. So with a dozen eggs, I definitely have a lot more density of cauliflower to carrots. Kind of takes up more space, but just between you and me, it's more delicious than the carrots. I will often do just a big jar of nothing but pickled cauliflower, because it's so good. So definitely want to make sure that our herbs get in there. That's the good stuff. And I'll leave carrots at the bottom. The carrots sink to the bottom. It's another kind of hard thing. Oh no! Casualties! Alright, and I basically want to go, so lip of the jar here, shoulder of the jar there. I called it the lip last time and then realized my mistake later. This is the lip, this is the shoulder. You want your liquid your veggies to kind of be underneath the line of the shoulder and your liquid to be higher than that. So I am going to put my liquid in there to cover up all my veggies. And the vinegar pickles don't need a weight as much as the ferment pickles do. Obviously it's better if everything is completely submerged in vinegar, because the vinegar is what's doing the pickling. But it's not like the ferment pickle process where anything above the line of the brine is you're doomed. So because the vinegar is highly acidic and it's basically killing the bacteria that would otherwise make your veggies go bad, the whole like anaerobic environment that you have to create with the ferments is not really an issue with the pure vinegar pickling. So that is probably about good. And I'm stirring this up a lot so I can also get some of the pickling spices in my ladle of liquid. because obviously like that's definitely where a lot of the flavor comes from, is those pickling spices, and they definitely do sink down to the bottom. So I'm gonna probably scoop some more in there when I get the rest of these veggies out. So I'm not gonna close the lid quite yet because I want it to cool down a little bit more, and I'm just gonna hope and pray that the rest of these eggs and veggies fit into this other jar. I don't suspect they're going to, but we shall see. Yeah.
Bring the jar closer. The camera doesn't see very well. The full jar?
You really can't see it.
It's hot.
You want to put on the cutting board?
It's hot.
Yeah.
I'm not touching that shit. It's boiling. My camera crew is telling me to grab that boiling ass hot jar with my hands and putting it over here. It's fucking hot, bro. No, I'm not touching that. Also because I don't want to disturb it too much because it's hot, almost boiling vinegar in a glass jar. And so, yeah, the heat transfer to that glass sometimes is a little bit too intense and glass can shatter. So these big jars I'm not as worried about, but you know, you kind of want to do a little bit of a cooling process before you just go and dump a bunch of boiling stuff in a glass. Because, yeah, that can be sometimes catastrophic. I'm glad you like it, True. So I think I have about a half a dozen more eggs in here. And you kind of want to be gentle, and I'm a little bummed because my ladle, this particular ladle, is too big to fit in these. So I'm actually going to get a different spoon to do this transfer because you don't want your eggs to crack too much. Obviously these were pre-hard-boiled and pre-shelled. I'm pretty sure everybody knows how to make a hard-boiled egg and shell it. We all grew up with Easter usually and Easter eggs. So if you don't know how to hard-boil and shell an egg, Google is your friend. The shelled eggs is what I put in here, but you know, they're hard-boiled eggs, so they are kind of, they can be fragile, so you don't want to just drop them in here too much because they will crack. The egg white will crack. And it's not the end of the world. It will definitely still pickle, but you run the risk of it kind of breaking apart in your jar when you're fishing stuff out. And then the yolky part kind of contaminates the vinegar part and it starts to look ugly. It's not going to make anything like taste bad, but it's definitely not as pretty. And you won't get the same kind of presentation with the cracked eggs. So, you know, the trying to be gentle with them as you put them in, that's important. So I'm going to put some of these veggies in here and layer them a little bit. Get some of these pretty carrots. Sometimes I like to do these with like purple carrots, and that will turn the vinegar mixture pink, and it will also dye your eggs pink. Some people like to use beet juice to make their eggs pink. You can totally do that too. I have not yet done vinegar pickled beets in with this mix. I do know you can do that. I just tend to like the fermented beets better than vinegar pickled beets, just because they're so good. So we're probably not going to fit all these veggies into this jar, but we're going to be close. So, oh no! Make sure these jalapenos get in there. That spicy goodness. Get in there. Alright, you can probably fit some of the garlic cloves. Definitely gotta get those garlic cloves in there. Almost. Maybe if I squish them a little bit. Okay, that's probably the maximum there. Sorry, fallen soldiers. And then we're going to get our liquid, get our pickling spices. And this is another reason why I don't typically like to pick up the pot and pour the liquid in, because it's usually pretty hot. So by doing it a ladle at a time, I am cooling it off a little bit each time I put a scoop in there, and it gives it a little bit more time to like actually transfer the heat. I have, if you can't tell, I have cracked the jars before, and it's always very sad. So learn from my previous mistakes and, you know, be patient with it. So this one is getting a fair bit more of the pickling spice because it tends to sink to the bottom. So I'm gonna need to make sure to scoop more of that out and put it in the other jar. Look how pretty that is. So you can imagine this with also the celery in there. It just has this really beautiful green and orange look to it. And when you do like purple carrots, it's sometimes do orange and purple carrots in there. It's just this really lovely presentation. And that is basically all she wrote for the vinegar pickled eggs. And you're gonna leave this on the counter. You can also put them in the fridge. You don't need to leave them on the counter. So if you're strapped for counter space, they can actually pickle in the fridge. You don't need to put them in the fridge. You don't need to leave them on the counter. Either will work. I just tend to find at about the 2-week mark, they are edible, but the vinegar won't have penetrated all the way to the yolk. So they will still be a little bit hard-boiled egg tasting when you get to the middle. If you leave them for 3 weeks, you're definitely at pickled egg phase. And that's when, it's like that flavor penetrates all the way to the core. So there you have it, pickled eggs. So you guys have any questions before I move on? Penetration, you gotta get it all the way in there. Yes. Oh, true. You've got me. You've got me covered. Okay, so let us revisit some of these other veggies that we did last time. What? I have a question. When are you sending me that? Get your own. My jar. Use my jar. Okay, so I already told you that the pickled beets were not ready, but I'm gonna taste them anyway because there's no harm in tasting your ferments every so often. That's the only way you're gonna know how fast your ferment is really happening. So this is really what I wanted to show you. And this is also the time that you get to see whether or not you're building up a yeast colony on the top of your ferment. So I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see this without me dumping the beet juice out of this. Can you see the top of the jar? Okay, so you see this white layer? This is not mold. This is yeast. Mold definitely grows in a circular pattern and pretty much out from the center, like you would expect a mold spore to do. It grows on the tops of these kinds of things just like it grows on the bread. But this is yeast, and it's not dangerous. You can still definitely eat the pickles in here. It's pretty common. In fact, it's actually more uncommon for me to do a ferment batch and not get common yeast on top. It's just kind of the process. So there's plenty of people who don't mind it and they just eat the pickles. I just happen to not like the way it tastes in my pickles. It just gives them kind of a bready, beer-y taste, and I'm really not a fan of beer. So I use one of these T-ball kinds of things. I have 2 different sizes of them, and they are great for scooping out the yeast when it starts to grow. And you can just sort of like get under it a little bit, and then it sort of strains in. It comes off in a kind of sheet like that. And then I just flip it in the sink and rinse it off and get a little bit more off. Like I said, it's not dangerous. However, if you leave it to grow on the top, then it does also create a surface for mold to potentially grow. But if you're not exposing the top of it to air, the chances of a mold spore actually landing on this are pretty low. So every time I open this thing up, I expose it to air, and there's a possibility for a mold spore to land on something that's at the surface of my water. If there's common yeast, it's way more likely to stay and grow on top of the yeast. Now, the kind of nice thing about having a layer of common yeast on the top, oh, and if, just in case you're wondering, comm is spelled K-A-H-M if you want to search for it and actually look to see what's happening here. So the kind of nice thing about the common yeast layer is that if mold starts to grow on your ferment, it actually is pretty easy to scoop out, and it separates the mold layer from the brine. And the mold isn't really going to hurt the brine. The only time the mold is going to hurt you is if you have a floaty. So this is why I caution against using powdered spices, or you definitely want to keep all your veggies under the layer of the brine. So I'm just going to scoop this out, just, because I've been letting this one go for a couple of weeks, and, I want to lessen the opportunities for mold to do the thing. And it's also a little less messy when I go in here and I grab my pickle weight out, because then I'm not mixing the yeast into my brine and making my ferment taste like beer. or bread or whatever. It's more like a beer flavor. So I can grab one of my beets out, and I can already tell by sticking my thumb into it, it's definitely softened up. And they're edible, for sure. They're a little crunchy for my taste, so I'm gonna let them go for a little while longer. Oh, so good though. Oh my god. Okay, boop. And my pickle weight is definitely still doing its job and keeping all my veggies into the brine. I haven't lost a lot of liquid to evaporation, so those are probably going to sit on the counter for another couple weeks. And I'm going to be a super duper happy camper when those are ready, because they are already delicious. Okay, so the other ferment veggies are these mean beans, and I already scooped the calm yeast off the top of these once, so you can see like this. So that layer that I just showed you is probably 2 weeks worth of growth. This is only about 1 week worth of growth, so you can see like the difference in thickness, right? So it's more like a singular layer. Can you guys see it? More or less? Yeah, it's just, it looks a little cloudy, and it's not as thick. When it grows, it starts to get these ridges, right? Because like the yeast is just growing out, and then it starts to pucker. And so it'll look like there's all these little ridges on it when you let it grow for a little while. But this hasn't had more than a few days really to grow, so it hasn't gotten, it hasn't filled up the space to where it's starting to pucker yet. But I am still going to do the same thing. Obviously, it's easier to scoop when it's thicker. It's less likely to break apart. So when it's like this, oftentimes I'll just let it go for a little while longer, so it's just easier to scoop out, and it's less likely to break into like small little particles. What, you don't like your beats like drum and bass style? Your true romance? I thought you were a drum and bass head. So there we go. Come on. The only thing about these pickle weights is they're a little slippery when you first pick them out. So I tried these a few days ago and they were almost ready. Okay, where's my kitchen helper? Somebody's got to come over here and taste one of these. You want to taste one of these?
Yeah.
Tanya will be my lovely assistant, and you can tell me if those are done.
Not yet.
Still,
So good.
right? It's almost there, right?
Mm.
So they're definitely snappy, and if we let these be done right now, they're totally edible. They would definitely be really good in a Bloody Mary. They're still just a little
So close.
on the snappy side. So if I left these for another 2 or 3 days, then they'd lose a little bit of that toothiness on the outer edge. And this is actually a really nice amount of spice. So at this point, the cayenne hasn't totally overpowered the beans. The longer you leave the ferment going, the spicier they get. So this is another reason why I blanch the green beans, because it does get them a little softer. It makes it so they don't have to sit in the brine for as long, and they end up not being like fibrous. And there's usually 1 or 2 beans that sit right next to a cayenne chili. So those are usually going to be like the really spicy ones. But yeah, those need a couple more days. But they're already really good. Oh yeah. Okay, so the other one was the sauerkraut. And like I said, I already dipped into that pink sauerkraut. In fact, I'll show it to you. Oh, I think we ate it all. Did we eat all the pink sauerkraut? Where is it? Did you hide it? Oh, we almost ate all the pink sauerkraut. So this is all that's left of all that huge mound of extra cabbage that I had. So obviously we've been enjoying this. So this, I just dumped in maybe a 1/4 cup, maybe 1/3 of a cup of the brine from my dilly beets, from the red dilly beets. And it turned the sauerkraut this beautiful pink color. And it also imparted some of the dilly beet flavor into the sauerkraut, but it also made the sauerkraut ferment much faster. So this was done and ready to eat, what would you say, in like 5 days? Maybe?
Maybe 6.5.
Maybe 6.5? Maybe 6.79 days. But anyway, it's delicious. And so I highly recommend using a little bit of your favorite brine in your next sauerkraut batch. If you have like a particularly really good ferment that you do, maybe it's the asparagus, maybe it's the beans, I don't know, maybe it's the dilly beets. Save a little bit and put that in your sauerkraut. So I had this cabbage, and I had already basically used up all the liquid in this batch because I dumped all my liquid out. And so by the time I was doing this cabbage, there wasn't as much liquid to go in here. So I was just like, oh, I need to add more brine. So you can just mix up the 2 cups of water to 1 tablespoon of salt and top it off so that your cabbage is very submerged underneath the level of your brine. Or you can do like I did and use, carefully, thoughtfully, use brine from a previous pickle. But you do that with caution, because sometimes that introduces a wild card and it's not always successful. But you never know until you experiment, and it's your kitchen. And the one thing that people are always afraid of when they first start fermenting, they always ask me, how do I know if it's poison, and how do I know if I'm going to kill myself by eating this? Your nose knows. You need to taste it. You need to smell it. So if it smells like sauerkraut, just slightly sour and maybe a little bready, and you taste it and it tastes like sauerkraut and there's nothing in it that goes, whoa, then it's probably fine. You can eat it. You will know if you open this thing up and it smells wrong. Then it's not good anymore. But you really do need to trust yourself. And if all else fails, ask somebody else. Maybe a roommate, maybe a spouse, maybe your mom if they're in the house. Just scoop off whatever's on the top. Maybe it's calm yeast, maybe there's a little bit of mold. Scoop it off, see if there's any vegetables that are poking up that have been exposed to the air, because those are the potential danger ones. If you have veggies that are exposed to the air, then you proceed with caution. It's not necessarily ruined. Sometimes they're fine. You just got to taste them. So, you take one specimen out. If it's like a bean or a beet or a Brussels sprout or whatever, something that's like finger, you grab one out, you pop it in your mouth. One of them is not going to kill you, especially if you chew it up and your whole being just says, nope, spit it out in the sink. Then you're definitely not going to die. Even if you were to chew it up and swallow it, it's not enough to get into your system that's actually going to cause you any trouble. It just tastes bad. You obviously don't want to eat the whole jar if it's going, no. But yeah, so, this is not as scary as some people think it is. It's not canning. Canning is an entirely different animal. And then you introduce the possibility of getting botulism. There's really no chance of that here because that's not what we're trying to do. We're not doing these long-term storage processes. This is just a couple of weeks on the counter. It's a fermentation process. And humans have been doing this for literally millennia. We've been making beer and pickled things for a really long time. So if our 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, human beings were able to figure this out and not die, so can you. So that's about, sometimes like the little net thing isn't, the right kind of material to get like the part of the yeast that's like stuck to the edge. So I just, use my finger and swipe it across. And the pickle weights always like the sauerkraut better. And often you'll pull like my pickle weights are shaped like this. Some of them have like a little handle on the top. So mine are just a particular thickness, so you can grab them in the middle. And they have these like canals right here. And I often find that the canal also has a bunch of calm yeast growing on it. So I try to do it carefully because, like I said, I don't like the flavor of it. But it's not dangerous. If you dump it out into your ferment, it's fine. It's not going to hurt you. It's the same. It's yeast. And if you can eat it in bread, you can eat it in your sauerkraut. So I typically take this leaf out and throw it away. It should be fine. But the whole reason why I use this leaf is to separate the potential for weird things and the kraut that I'm going to eat. So just as a general practice, I throw it away. But since I've been using pickle weights, there's really no reason for me to do that, and it's just habit. So, whatever. It's kind of a pain in the ass to get your fork in there when you have a big flat leaf over top of it. So let's look at this. And this is gorgeous, right? So this has been on the counter for a bit longer than I typically leave my kraut because I'm just really impatient. And the longer you leave it, the more uniformly sort of transparent your little bits of cabbage are going to be. So that's what it looks like. And the smell is kind of bready because of all that calm yeast that was kind of slipping down the sides. And that is sauerkraut. Totally ready. And I'm going to put this ring that I took off last week so that we could have some gas escape. I'm going to put it back on now. Then I'm going to put it in the fridge. And that is going to be much better when it's cold. Room temperature kraut is like Bavarian style. They cook it. I'm not into it. I like cold kraut. Cold kraut's more like the salad-y kind of thing. So, if you recall, if you were here last time, that one was done with no spices. It's just cabbage and salt. So it's as plain a sauerkraut as you're ever going to get. I typically do not make them that way just because I have discovered so many amazing flavor combinations. I did that for your benefit so you can see that it is that simple. But as soon as you make it once, definitely the second time around, try some spices, try some herbs, try some things, flavors that you think might be an interesting combination. Because if there's anything that carries the flavor of the thing you add to it, it's cabbage. So these were the vinegar pickled Brussels sprouts. Boop. And these probably aren't done either. And the way that I typically try these is I cut them in half. So I can, you know, share them with somebody who else wants to try these. A kitchen helper, anybody want to try one of these? I think they're still a little too stiff. Yeah. Lots of flavor. Still very Brussels sprouty. Which anybody who knows me knows I'm not a fan of Brussels sprouts. So that still tastes a lot like a fresh Brussels sprout in the middle to me. And that's not what I want. I want it to taste like pickled dilly ball. And they're not ready. I'd say these will be at least another week, if not 2, before I'm actually really satisfied with them and I don't have the reminiscent of just eating a raw Brussels sprout in the middle. And then the flavor will probably soak all the way through to the middle. All right, so there you have it. We got, okay, so that is now not too hot to handle, so you can see how beautiful this is. And before I put these up for good, I'll get a smaller spoon and get all those good pickling spices. Actually, maybe I can just find a bigger spoon. Like one like this, and then I can get in here now that all these pickling spices have settled, and you'll see there's just like a lot of pickling spices in here, and then I can add more of them. I definitely don't want to dump those pickling spices anywhere else, so if I have a little extra vinegar and water mixture, sometimes I'll just strain off that with, you know, like one of these little tea strainers or something like that. I'll strain that off into another jar and maybe use it in a salad dressing or something like that. Just so I can get all these pickling spices that are in here and make sure they make it into the jars, because you definitely want to trap your eggs and your veggies in their jars with all of that spicy goodness. So there you go. And that is, and you know, I'm not even going to use a weight with this one. And I can put the lid on my jar, and that is going to wait on the counter for about 3 weeks, and they'll probably be perfect. So, does anybody have any question before we go about either vinegar pickling and the eggs and the escabeche or fermentation? I see my little helper elves over there just going nuts in the chat room. What if my face eats my own face? You should definitely let your face eat your own face. And you should definitely do it while in a group, pretending to be a group that's a group. Because that is the place for meta things like faces eating their own faces happen. Danny. Hi, Danny. Did we get the word botch from botulism? You botched it? Really?
1693.
That makes sense. That definitely makes sense. 1693 is when we started using botch. You really botched that up.
Yep.
Yeah.
William Patrickson.
What?
William Patrickson.
William Patrickson. I am being told.
ate some canned cabbage and died from botulism. Well, he botched that, quaint his friend, who later wrote it in his obituary.
Well, there you have it. I don't know if you heard that, but William who?
Patrickson.
William Patrickson killed himself by trying to can cabbage and died of botulism, so his friend coined the term. He really botched that. So don't botch canning. I think maybe one of these times I will show face eating itself non-neutral. You're gonna have to be clearer than that, Danny. I missed whatever came before that, but if I know you at all. Yeah, so maybe one of these times I will do canning, so you can see the difference between pickling and canning. And there is a bunch of more processes that you have to take into account when you're canning, like sterilizing your jars and not burning your face off with the boiling water and the tongs and the glass. And I do some canning with fruit when I get a bumper crop of fruit, like the peaches on my tree. This year I am hoping to get way too many tomatoes that I could possibly eat because I put 34 tomato plants into my garden this year. So I do plan on making fresh salsa and having too much of it, so I am going to try canning the salsa this year. I've never done that before, so you guys might be able to watch that process. But I do have this handy dandy canning set, so if that is something that you might be into, I really do highly recommend getting a set that has tools in it, like this. Because I have done canning without these tools and it's dangerous. There are very hot things that end up slipping and breaking. But like a set of tools like this you can get on Amazon or whatever for like less than $10 usually. And they come with like jar grabbers and tongs for you to grab hot jars and dump them all over the floor out of your boiling water. So if you want to can with me, you've got time. I'm not going to do it anytime soon. I would pick up a set like that. And this is a funnel, so you don't dump hot jam or hot salsa all over everything. But yeah, there you have it, guys. Let's see, salsa, jam, salsa. Yes, yes, snack. Salsa is good for, it is, salsa is good for the soul. Definitely is. All right, so what are we at? Was that like an hour? What do you think?
Yep.
That an hour?
Yep.
So that's a good pickle show, right? We did escabeche veggies and we did eggs and we checked in on our veggies from last time. So I hope you guys try this because the eggs are really good. What?
Tune in 2 weeks.
2 weeks, 3 weeks? What do you guys think?
Like
I don't even know if I'll have something to pickle.
3 weeks for the escabeche.
Oh yes, 3 weeks. Oh yes. I would say they are edible in 2 weeks. If you want them to be like all the way pickled to the core, then 3 weeks is definitely, you know, I've never had to wait more than 3 weeks with a hot egg, with a hot vinegar brine technique. If you do them without doing the cooking part, if you just do it, because you can do it with a cold vinegar too. You can just dump stuff in a jar with a bunch of vinegar in it, and they will pickle on the countertop with no other work to it. It's just definitely the lazy way, and it will go slower. I've never seen that happen in less than 4 weeks. So yeah.
Question from the audience.
Question from the audience.
Do you ever put things in the sun to pickle?
Do I ever put things in the sun to pickle? I have not done that, and I don't think I would recommend it. Sunlight does a couple of different things. One, it heats stuff up, so, you know, could be a wild card. It does also tend to disinfect things. I just have never tried it, and I know from fermenting, you definitely do not want to have your ferments in direct sunlight. In fact, I often take like a kitchen towel like this and just lay it over my jars. You know, the vinegar pickles, you don't need to worry about that, but the ferments tend to just actually go a little bit more uniformly and more safely if you don't expose them to a lot of light. So if you have a really bright kitchen or your jars are going to like hit any kind of direct sunlight over the course of 24 hours, put a towel over them. Those you definitely don't want to put in the sun. Vinegar pickles, I really don't know if there is anything that would be done differently. Just because the vinegar, it's pretty strong and it does its job pretty well at killing stuff off. Yay, Trey's here! She said happy birthday! Yesterday was my birthday. Thank you, Trey! Yay! I hope Trey got to see all of the egg pickling this time around. Yes. So what's for the top tier subscribers? The garden tour stream? I mean, we could do a garden tour stream if you guys want. Yeah, Violet is T2 now? What's T2?
12.
12.
That's a
And-
1.
Oh, it is. I'm not wearing my glasses. 12. 42. You know what that means? I am the answer. This is the year, folks, that I am the answer. You didn't even know what the question was, but you know what the answer is. It's me for a whole year. Oh, Trey just joined in. So luckily this will be archived, and you too can learn the secrets of the pickled eggs that make the Bloody Marys so memorable. And the escabeche. Sand celery this time. It was not pretty in the garden. But yes, highly recommend. Yes, I am old as fuck. Thank you. Yes, I am. Aw, Trey. Aww. Okay, guys, so let me know what you want to see pickled, or if there's something special that you've had at my house or heard me talk about, or in my Bloody Marys, or any of that stuff. Like, let me know what you want to watch happen. I can definitely take you through a tour in the garden if you want to know anything about growing plants. I do have a fair bit of experience keeping plants thriving and getting them to give me food. It's kind of a magic trick. So, what?
Back to music.
So I'm gonna leave you now with music.
C is for cookie, that's good enough for me. Oh, cookie starts with C. Yeah! Cookie starts with C. Oh boy! Cookie starts with C.